Understanding starts within. It begins with the courage to look deeply at the world around us, to acknowledge the vastness and complexity of it, and to embrace the idea that there is so much more than what we first perceive. It's not about skimming the surface. It's about diving into the depth of a situation, a person, or an idea, and discovering the layers that lie beneath. Too often we make quick judgments, evaluating situations with the lens of our own experiences, assumptions, or biases. We glance at someone and think we know their story based on how they look or how they speak. But understanding demands more than a superficial glance. It asks us to look with new eyes. Consider how many times in life we have faced misunderstandings or made decisions based on incomplete information. How often do we think we understand something because it's been presented in a way that makes sense to us? But when we dig deeper, we realize there's a whole different narrative. I've experienced this in my own life many times. When I moved to a new country, everything seemed unfamiliar, from the food to the language to the culture itself. At first, I found myself retreating into what was comfortable, sticking to people who were like me, thinking that this was the safest way to navigate the unknown. But as I chose to understand the deeper truths behind the culture, the people, and the environment, everything changed. I began to understand that the culture wasn't just different from mine. It had its own logic, its own beauty, its own rhythm. I began to see beyond the differences and recognize the shared humanity in each individual I encountered. Every conversation, every interaction became an opportunity to understand not just the other person's perspective, but also to learn about myself. That's what true understanding does. It transforms you. It challenges you to grow beyond your own narrow view of the world. When you step into the shoes of another person, you're not just walking in their path. You're allowing your worldview to expand. You're saying, I may not have all the answers, but I am willing to listen, to learn, to grow. It takes humility. It takes a willingness to admit that your understanding may be limited and that there's something greater waiting to be discovered if you just stop and listen. But this process is not always easy. In our world today, we are bombarded with so many voices, so many opinions, and so many distractions. We often prioritize speed over depth, convenience over understanding. The fast pace of life pushes us into a space where we don't have time to really understand the full picture. We are taught to move quickly, to make decisions on the fly, and to act decisively. But in the rush of life, we miss the opportunity to pause, to reflect, and to truly understand. There's a story I remember from my early years as a leader that shaped my view on understanding. I was in the midst of a difficult situation, one where there was growing tension between myself and a group of people I was working with. The conflict seemed insurmountable. There was a division so deep that it felt like no words could bridge the gap. It seemed like a lost cause. But then I remembered something my mentor once told me. When you are confronted with conflict, don't seek to be right, seek to understand. So I stopped arguing. I stopped trying to defend my position. Instead, I sat down with each individual involved, not with the intention of explaining myself, but with the intent to understand their perspective. I asked questions. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't try to rush to a conclusion. I simply allowed them to share their thoughts, their fears, their frustrations. And as I did this, something miraculous happened. The walls that separated us began to crumble. The animosity that had clouded our communication began to dissipate. As they spoke, I realized that our differences weren't as significant as they seemed. What we were really fighting over was misunderstanding. We were all so focused on defending our own points of view that we failed to see the bigger picture. But by seeking to understand, we built a bridge. We found common ground. We reached a place where we could agree, not because we were forced to, but because we truly understood each other. That experience taught me the true power of understanding. It wasn't in the agreement we reached or the solutions we found, but in the process of coming together, in the act of listening and seeing each other as human beings first. Understanding in its purest form breaks barriers. It doesn't focus on winning or being right. It focuses on connection, on empathy, on the shared humanity that lies beneath the surface of every person you meet. And this is the message I want to leave you with today. The power of understanding lies in its ability to bring us together, to turn conflict into collaboration, to turn division into unity. Understanding doesn't require us to agree on everything. It doesn't mean that we have to abandon our own beliefs or opinions. But it does require us to open our hearts, to listen with intention, and to see beyond the immediate differences that may separate us. It's about recognizing that at our core, we are all seeking the same things: connection, peace, love, and understanding. When we begin to lead with understanding, we transform not just ourselves, but the world around us. The world is full of challenges. But when we make the decision to understand, we unlock the potential for true change. Understanding is the key that can turn isolation into community, hatred into love, and conflict into peace. And it all begins with us. It begins with the willingness to understand. True understanding is the bridge between people. It's the invisible thread that connects hearts, minds, and souls, enabling us to move beyond our differences and find common ground. But this doesn't happen automatically. It requires conscious effort and the willingness to look beyond the surface and see the deeper essence of the people we encounter. In a world so often defined by division, misunderstanding, and polarization, understanding is the most powerful tool we have to bring us closer together. It helps us recognize that despite the variety of our experiences, there is a shared humanity that binds us all. I have seen this firsthand in my own journey. Years ago, I was involved in a project that brought together people from very different backgrounds, each with their own set of beliefs, customs, and practices. At first, it was difficult to imagine how we could ever work together. There were cultural gaps, language barriers, and varying expectations. Yet when I stopped focusing on what made us different and started focusing on the things we had in common, our desire for success, our shared goals, our need for respect, the dynamics began to shift. The more I sought to understand their viewpoints, their struggles, and their dreams, the more I saw how connected we truly were. One of the most profound moments of realization came when I was sitting across from a man who had a very different upbringing and worldview than I did. He was passionate about a cause that initially seemed foreign and even contradictory to my own values. There was a time when I might have judged him harshly, dismissed his views as wrong, or tried to prove my own perspective was right. But instead, I decided to listen, to understand his why. As he spoke, I realized something profound. We both wanted the same outcome, but we had different paths to reach it. His journey had been shaped by circumstances and experiences that were so different from mine, yet the fundamental desire for change, for betterment, for progress was the same. By understanding his background, his struggles, and his motivations, I was able to bridge the gap between us. We didn't have to agree on everything, but we found common ground that allowed us to collaborate effectively. Understanding has a unique power to dissolve misunderstandings and open up possibilities that once seemed impossible. When you truly understand someone, you no longer see them as an opponent or an outsider. Instead, you see them as an individual whose experiences have shaped their worldview, just as yours have shaped yours. And this realization is the foundation for connection. It's the start of a relationship built on empathy, trust, and respect. Think of the power that could be unleashed if in every situation of conflict, instead of rushing to judgment or trying to be right, we took a moment to understand the other person's perspective. How many arguments, debates, and wars could be avoided if we simply listened? How much pain, division, and heartache could be spared if we sought first to understand rather than to prove our own point. In many ways, we have been conditioned to approach the world with a mindset of opposition. We are taught to compete, to win, to be right. But true understanding challenges this paradigm. It calls us to think in terms of connection, collaboration, and shared human experience. It compels us to move beyond ego and engage with others as equals, each with our own unique story to tell. This is where the real power lies. Understanding doesn't mean we abandon our own identity or our core beliefs. It doesn't mean that we relinquish our right to stand firm in what we believe. What it means is that we give ourselves the opportunity to see the world through another person's eyes. It allows us to appreciate the beauty in diversity, to acknowledge that every person we meet has a story, a history, a reason for being the way they are. And through that understanding, we can develop the empathy needed to build relationships that transcend superficial differences. There is a story that has stayed with me over the years, one that illustrates the depth of what understanding can do. It's about a community that had been torn apart by years of conflict. People on either side of the divide lived in constant fear and suspicion of one another. There was no communication, no trust, and no hope for reconciliation. But one day, a group of individuals from both sides came together and decided to break the cycle. They sat down and began to share their stories. Not to argue, not to convince, but simply to understand. As each person spoke, their humanity began to shine through. They told stories of loss, of pain, of love, of dreams shattered and rebuilt. As they listened to each other, the walls that had separated them began to crumble. They realized that despite their different experiences, their hopes, their fears, and their desires were not so different after all. They wanted peace. They wanted unity. They wanted to build something better for the future. And in that moment, understanding became the bridge that allowed them to walk across the chasm of division and into the light of reconciliation. What if we all made that choice? What if instead of retreating into our own corners, we made the decision to reach out, to listen, to understand? What if we treated every encounter, every disagreement, and every challenge as an opportunity to build bridges instead of walls? How much more powerful would our world be if understanding, not division, was the foundation of our interactions? Understanding isn't just a tool for resolving conflict. It's the framework for building deeper, more meaningful relationships. It's the key to unlocking the potential for collaboration, creativity, and collective progress. And it's a gift we can offer to one another every day. It's in the way we speak to our co-workers, the way we treat strangers, and the way we engage with our families. When we understand, we are not just changing ourselves, we are changing the world. This is the bridge that understanding creates, the one that leads us to peace, to connection, to unity. It's a bridge that begins with a simple decision: to see others not as strangers or adversaries, but as people who, like us, are navigating the journey of life, seeking to be heard, to be understood, and to be valued. When we make this decision, we have the power to change everything. Empathy is the heartbeat of understanding. It's the force that drives us to go beyond our own perspective and truly step into the world of another person. Without empathy, understanding remains superficial, and the connections we make are limited and fleeting. But when we embrace empathy, we open ourselves up to a deeper, more profound level of connection that transcends words and breaks through the barriers that separate us. Empathy is not just a feeling, it's an active choice. It requires us to be fully present with another person, to listen not just to what they are saying, but to what they are feeling, to what is unspoken, to the emotions that lie beneath the surface. It's about going beyond the surface of someone's behavior or their words and asking, what is really going on beneath all of this? What are they experiencing that I can't see with my eyes, but that I can feel with my heart? I remember a time in my own life when I was deeply challenged by a person who seemed impossible to connect with. There was a man I worked with who at first appeared cold and distant. He kept to himself, never really engaging in the team or showing any signs of warmth. At the time, I felt frustration. I wondered why he wasn't participating, why he wasn't showing any interest in collaboration. But one day, I decided to approach him differently. Instead of allowing myself to feel rejected or frustrated by his silence, I chose to understand. I began to listen, really listen, not just to his words, but to the silence that spoke volumes. I asked him how he was doing, how things were going in his life. And for the first time, I saw something in him I hadn't before. He opened up about struggles I never would have guessed were present. He spoke about his past, about the fears and insecurities he carried, about the hardships he had faced that shaped him into the person he had become. Suddenly, everything made sense. The distance, the reserve. It wasn't about me. It was about his own struggles and how he had learned to protect himself in the face of pain. The moment I allowed myself to feel empathy for him, everything changed. I wasn't looking at him as a difficult colleague anymore. I saw him as a human being who, like all of us, had his own battles to fight. That understanding unlocked a new level of communication between us. I was able to support him, not from a place of judgment, but from a place of compassion. Empathy, in many ways, is the bridge between judgment and compassion. It asks us to step out of our comfort zones and into the lives of others. It compels us to ask the hard questions, not just about what someone is doing, but about why they are doing it. It challenges us to see people as more than their actions or their behavior. It asks us to look deeper, to recognize that everyone is fighting a battle that we may not see, and that sometimes the behaviors that frustrate us are merely expressions of that hidden pain. The most transformative experiences I have had in my life have come from moments of deep empathy. I've been in situations where people seemed difficult, distant, or even antagonistic. It would have been so easy to respond with defensiveness or frustration. But when I chose empathy, when I allowed myself to understand rather than judge, I discovered layers of humanity that I could never have imagined. I realized that everyone has a story. No one is simply what they appear to be. Each person carries a lifetime of experiences that have shaped them, just as our own experiences have shaped us. And when we take the time to truly understand and feel what others are going through, we break down the walls that separate us. Empathy is the antidote to apathy and indifference. In a world that often encourages us to focus on our own lives and problems, empathy pulls us outside of ourselves. It demands that we see the world not just through our own lens, but through the eyes of others. It challenges us to think about the struggles that others face every day and to care about their well-being. In my travels around the world, I've encountered people from diverse backgrounds, different races, cultures, and walks of life. Each time I've been in a situation where I initially felt disconnected or out of place, I've realized that empathy is the key to unlocking the connections that bring us together. In places where I did not speak the language, where the customs were unfamiliar, and where the people were very different from me, it was empathy that bridged the gap. I did not need to speak the same language to understand their struggles. I did not need to live their lives to connect with their hopes and dreams. When I allowed myself to feel what they were feeling, when I took the time to listen to their stories and understand their pain, something profound happened. It was as if the barriers that divided us simply melted away, and in their place was a deep sense of shared humanity. Empathy is not just about understanding someone's pain. It's also about celebrating their joy, recognizing their achievements, and being a source of encouragement in their moments of triumph. It's about being there not only when things are hard, but also when they're going well, and sharing in the beauty of their success. True empathy is a dynamic force that flows in both directions. It's about standing with someone through their darkest moments and also dancing with them in their lightest ones. Too often we make the mistake of thinking empathy means agreeing with someone or adopting their point of view. But that's not true empathy. True empathy doesn't require us to agree. It simply requires us to understand. When we empathize, we are saying, I see you, I hear you, I feel your pain, I celebrate your joy, and I honor your experiences. Empathy is the bridge that connects us to each other's hearts, and it's the foundation upon which all meaningful relationships are built. It allows us to share in the beauty of each person's life and to offer a helping hand when the road gets rough. The beauty of empathy is that it's a tool available to all of us. It doesn't require us to have all the answers. It doesn't require us to be perfect. All it requires is the willingness to open our hearts and minds to another person's reality. When we choose empathy, we choose to be a part of someone else's journey, not just as a bystander, but as an active participant in their growth, their healing, and their joy. It's the greatest gift we can give to others and to ourselves.